Can I get a verbal confirm?
Yeah, it's all good, Jason.
Thank you,
Yes.
Brent.
Can see.
Alrighty. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I think most of you will know me. I do believe there are a few new names on here. So this update that I'm giving is really very high level. I thought I would use the opportunity as a bit of a reset given all the turmoil that's gone on in the past few years, what with restructures, COVID, and a few staff movements. So it's just sort of resetting the scene. In addition to that, I'll be talking a little bit about how we're working a little bit differently at the moment, and also just giving an update on who we are and, as I said, resetting the scene in terms of what we do. Now, a lot of this may come across as all very well known to some of you, but I thought it would be a good point just to give a sort of a refresh, and bear in mind that today's seminar is really meant as a sort of a check-in and a bit of a touch point, and then later this morning we'll discuss around a few sort of burning topics that are either of interest to yourselves as DDHs and 146s or to the CAA. After my short presentation, Gaetano will take over and go into a little bit more depth and detail around the what the unit is seeing. And then Rebecca's going to give us a presentation on the new flight test approval process. So with that, I'll start with, let's see if it's not progressing. There we go. In terms of what we do. Now, if anyone wants a bit of bedtime reading, they're welcome to go and have a look at the link at the bottom for the CA statement of intent. But this is one of the graphics that I've pulled out of that document, and it puts it very briefly and very nicely in terms of why the CA exists and gives an idea of what we're looking for, whether that's a design approval or major model authorization, or an airworthiness certificate. Our vision and purpose and the reason why we're here is to ensure a safe and secure aviation system so that the public, the people feel safe, are safe when they fly. We do that by trying to enable people to fly because, as everyone knows, the easy way to keep everyone safe from aviation is to stop aviation, but that's not what we're here for. We're here to enable a safe system. And we do that through effective regulation that both protects and enables the system. Now, in terms of where we work, this is a little bit different. As you've probably seen in the media and talking to some of our staff members, our normal office location, Astron House, is still closed and will remain closed until mid-2023 while seismic strengthening takes place, particularly around the floors to improve the safety of the building. While that is occurring, we have two temporary office locations in the CBD, one for sort of hot desking and another more permanent location, but we are quite limited in terms of being able to host external meetings. We can do it, but we don't have a bespoke or a set up venue for that. Of course, because of I'm trying to present, my computer would like to restart now, so let me try and pause that. And of course, it's not giving me the option. Okay, I'll carry on. It won't take 14 minutes. The other thing is, so while our strategic goals and our work doesn't change, it's obviously how we connect and how we work with yourselves as participants is slightly different. Now, of course, where our work is completely different. Glenn is calling in from the Manawatu. I'm in the CBD now. Most of our team are either working from home or from other offsite locations. That means we have to work a little bit differently. There are challenges with that, but at the same time, there are also some really good advantages to that. Moving along. I've put up this graphic just to give an idea visually in terms of how our structure has changed in the last few years, and there are a few movements and changes in reporting lines, etc. So most of you will know me up there in the middle. My direct report is David Harrison, who's the Deputy Chief Executive for Aviation Safety. Some of you may have had interactions with him previously, particularly from the personnel and licensing side. And our Director of Civil Aviation is Keith Manch. I currently have 4 direct reports. Many of them you will know. David Gill, who's on today as the Team Leader Aircraft Inspection and Registration. We have Gaetano Setineri, who's the Team Leader Product Certification that most of you would have dealt with. And Warren Hatfield is the Chief Advisor Airworthiness. Emma is our new Team Leader for Certification Coordinators. So she looks after all of the support teams that deal with your applications coming in and for closing off our projects, etc. And we've been quite fortunate with the product certification team with not a lot of staff movement, but there are a few names here that some of you may not have interacted with previously. So we've got Brendan Shanley, who primarily helps us with the emerging technology support and the 102 support, and both in terms of looking at RPAS product certification, but also looking at other emerging technologies such as electrical aircraft, etc. We've got Glenn, who's opened up the presentation today. We have Kavita Van Mari, who's been here for some time, as well as Lino, Phil, and Renz. And Rebecca Langton is our flight test engineer. Some of you may have interacted with her previously as our emerging technology program manager. And that is Gaetano's team at the moment. We are carrying 2 vacancies as well, but I'll let Gaetano talk to that in the and provide an update in the next presentation. Now, just to go back for a second, the reason I've done this is also to give it a feel for some of the changes that have occurred in the CA in terms of our roles and responsibilities. I think many of you may have known me as the previous team lead for product certification, and with some of the changes in the roles and responsibilities, I thought now would be a good time just to go over, because it's not always clear, to go over what our actual roles and responsibilities are. Now, some of these I've pulled out of the position descriptions themselves, but it does give a bit of a feel for if, let's say, if you have a particular concern or query on which level to direct it at. So in terms of the certification of flight test engineers, these are our operational staff. These are our eyes and ears on the ground. These are the ones that you interact with on a daily basis. And from the PD, that reflects quite nicely as well. They are responsible for the highlighted areas for assessing that applications meet the requirements for certification, and they make and give effect to the product certification decisions. Primarily, they are the specialists in those areas, and we seek their advice on what looks good. The team leader product certification is primarily tasked with making sure that the management of the team performs at the right expectations, the right standards, and that the quality of the work that they do meets our standards. This is quite important because the team leader product certification is not really the, not the senior certification engineer. They don't necessarily have the same expertise as the other certification engineers, so they are, the team leader is primarily there as the first frontline manager. They're the first line of management for that team. Primarily, they are there to ensure that the team performs and performs well. Now, given they do have a technical background, they may be pulled into some projects as a technical SME, but primarily they're there to support the team because that's the only role that does that. For the certification manager, the primary function is that the unit functions effectively and efficiently and maximizes its impact on the safe and secure skies. I think what you can take out of this is that the higher up you go, just like with any other organization, the more strategic looking it is and the less technical, operational, or tactical it is. So please just bear that in mind. I guess we have seen some queries coming in, particularly from operators who come in at either completely the wrong level, completely the wrong units, etc. And I thought this might help in having some of those conversations around if there are issues with either the wrong strategic view or the wrong, not looking at the big picture, that may be something that might come in, say, at my level as being appropriate around a query on whether that is the right fit. Whereas if it's a technical, operational query or concern, that really should be at that appropriate operational tactical level. Now, given from our restructure a few years ago, things are a little bit different in terms of the faces and who is responsible for what functions that the CA undertakes. I've listed a few other key staff here that's important for DDHs and 146s. Excuse me. The manager for the certification of organizations, including Part 146s and 148s, is Adrian Duncan. The team leader for Part 146 is John Main, and I think most of you would have had an interaction with them by now. Some other important staff to be aware of are the manager for licensing and standards, particularly around flight test approvals, pilot licensing, and LAME licensing. And IAs is Joe Franklin, whereas anything around what used to be termed surveillance or auditing is now termed monitoring inspection, is managed by Steve Kern. Having said that, whether it's a audit or a recertification of your organization, you're likely to see the same SMEs. So you're likely to see some of Katano's team attend as part of the teams that report to these managers. There's a number of movements around the chief advisors. Warren Hatfield remains the chief advisor airworthiness, but he has taken a reporting change. It used to go to licensing and standards. However, now he reports to our unit, which I think has certainly helped in keeping the connection between product certification, airworthiness certification, and continued airworthiness together. Alaska White is our new chief advisor for human factors. I think you may see some more interactions with her. Although she reports to licensing and standards under Joe Franklin, she will get pulled into some of the type certification and STC type projects that have a human factors element to them. And another important and a new staff movement is Mark Brogren in the chief advisor flight standards area, who's primarily tasked with ensuring that the standards are appropriately discharged across, whether it's IAs or pilot licenses, and again, reports to the licensing and standards manager, Joe. To touch on, again, how we work, this is again pulled from the statement of intent, but appears in various places on our website. These are our 5 values. These are the values that we're striving to achieve for all of our staff in all of our interactions with participants and the public. We strive to ensure that we work together to achieve and succeed through collaboration. We strive to be open and honest in our communications for maximum transparency. Given we can't be transparent about everything, given the nature of our business, but where we can, we will try. Integrity, we try and do the right thing. And sometimes that is not the popular, same thing as the popular thing. Respect, we try and treat all people with consideration and kindness. There is a lot around trying to be kind to people, but it's making sure that there's a level, and it ties into the next one, level of professionalism when we act in a way that brings credit to ourselves and our organization. Everything we try and do, excuse me, is we try and look through this lens when we are interacting and how we work. given that there are some challenges, the certification team are seeing a high volume of applications coming in. Certification in particular, whether that's my unit as aircraft and products or Adrian's unit for the organizations, we are seeing an increase in the applications coming in. This could be linked to the sort of, I guess you could call it the recovery post-pandemic, or an increase in activity or the pent-up demand. Because certification is an applicant demand-driven task, we don't have much control in terms of managing that that influx of applications. Because of that, we are seeing that it's going to take much longer to process applications. There is a suite of comms and coming out that you're likely to see through various means, through the website, through out of office replies or order responses to applications, where there will be comms around when we receive applications, we will only accept complete applications, and to please use the latest revision of the form on the website. If you don't, there is a real risk that we'll respond saying, please resubmit. Unfortunately, we're in this space where we do have such a high volume that if we are accepting partial applications, we're effectively disadvantaging those who have submitted complete applications that we can assess. We are resource constrained, although Katana's team has done well in that we've maintained our core competency throughout the pandemic. We didn't have to lay anyone off. We are seeing that increase in demand in services, so we will be a lot stricter when it comes to accepting applications. Please also note that we will be prioritizing based on the risk and the impact to the aviation safety system and relative to the system. So it's not about one application versus another application. We do look at the entire system and see where we should be prioritizing. Turnaround times are extended. So if you do have an indication of what an entry in service limit is or return to service for an aircraft is required, then please let us know up front. It's not to say that we will always meet that, but if we have an idea or context around what the challenges or commercial demands are, we may be able to plan it more appropriately. I think we've been we've had a few challenges, I would say, recently with a number of operators coming to us at the 11th hour, only advising us then around the type of operation, why it's important and why it needs to occur when they're planning for it. If we had known a lot of that contextual information up front, we possibly could have planned or prioritized it slightly differently. That's all I really wanted to talk to you about today. I don't know if there's any questions on that. I suspect not, given that it is quite a high level. But I'll hand it over to Glenn. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason, for that. If there's any questions pertaining to Jason's presentation, we can have if we've got some spare time at the end, we can discuss it then. So next in line is Gaetano. Gaetano, can you please start your presentation? That'd be much appreciated.
And your mic on, mate?
Good morning, everyone. How are you all today? Hope we're doing well. Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll try to go in a little bit more detail about the status of the team right now and what we're working on today. Talking kind of our workload in a little bit more detail than Jason was able to talk to. I do want to talk to international engagement and validation of STCs and design approvals today. And then the last topic is something that will be a little bit new: development of certification memos and FAQs in this space. So hopefully that'll be very of interest to all of you. I can just get my screen drill forward here. So product certification workload, as Jason mentioned, we're still down 2 full-time staff. We have been doing recruiting efforts. We had 2 offers go out. One has been accepted. One is still pending. But both these were from overseas candidates, which means getting them back into New Zealand will be an effort, even with the recent border openings and loosenings of visas. We're also getting a lot of queries across the board from industry on a range of topics. And it's not just, and a lot of it is not necessarily from yourselves in the 146 space. We are getting everything from operators to repair stations to random private pilots asking about how can they put equipment on their airframes. And it seems to have taken an uptick in probably the last several months. So that is taking a bigger than expected chunk of our time these days. In terms of our open work requests right now, I just want to show you some numbers here to give you an idea. So keep in mind, we have 7 staff, one of which is primarily dedicated to, the emerging technology sphere. We have 5 21B work requests. These are the type amendments and/or type acceptances. These tend to be fairly involved projects that take, months for sure, if not sometimes not over a year to complete. And do take up anywhere from 2 to 3 staff at a time. 21Es, which is our STC, is kind of the bulk of our workload, as you can tell. 21 of those are open and considered active right now. When I say active, we do have open work requests that we will put on hold from time to time due to inactivity. This does not include those. So if any of those come back online, which can happen at pretty short notice, that workload can spike pretty unexpectedly. 21N, which is standard deviations or standard acceptance or acceptance of technical data. Currently only 4 of those. We don't get a ton of these, but occasionally they do come in waves. ACMs generally cover foreign validations of CANs, STCs, or other product approvals, design approvals. We have 12 of these open right now. It does cover a few other minor things, but validations is the big one. And then in terms of new or renewing design delegates, we have 2 of these in work right now. And this statement at the bottom here, I must emphasize, because this is just the numbers. And if you were to add all this up and divide by 6.5 or 7, you'd see if that was if just one request was assigned to everyone would have a pretty full workload, but it doesn't account for complexity either. And we are seeing, which ultimately I think is a good thing. We are seeing an increase in complexity in our STCs. People are putting more newer and better kit on their airframes these days, and they're trying to do new things and take advantage of the new technology that is available. Also, complexity of regulation comes into play here. We've are officially in the 23 Amendment 64 space, and we have one STC that is using that currently, and that is a challenge. It is a new way of doing certification to a degree in terms of developing the certification basis and the means of compliance. So there's a lot of learnings going on right there as well. So it's bottom line, it's not just about the numbers, it's about the effort involved with each one of these activities as well. We also do have a certain amount of our time that is taken up outside of our core BAU. PBN operational approvals are kind of bread and butter, but we do get a fair amount of them, and they do take up time. Complex 1 and 2 applications. While we have Brendan Shanley trying to spearhead the workload in this area, it does require other team members to assist it on a not irregular basis. So again, that is time supporting that unit. The certification and monitoring of our 146 units. Again, this is no longer our direct responsibility, but as Jason said, usually one or more of our SMEs will likely accompany either the certification of organizations unit under John Main for these, or someone from Steve's current unit to provide subject matter expertise in the design space. And those are usually multi-day efforts over a short span of space that can take people take up people's availability quite significantly. And we also do a fair amount of exemption support as well. So these are, some of them are pretty routine, some of them are less routine, but a lot of times people are wanting to use kit or apply kit in a way that is not compliant with the rule, but they feel there is a safety case for using so. Hence, they apply for an exemption, and therefore our certification engineers generally have to provide their input on whether the proposed use of the kit meets an acceptable safety standard, an appropriate safety case for granting that exemption. And the COVID effect. We did have 3 staff simultaneously with COVID at the same time and in isolation. I went through it myself a little over a month ago, and I was out for a week personally, and then my family was isolating for another 2 weeks after that. So it is a profound effect on people when they do get it. We cannot predict how long they'll need to recover, how long they'll need to look after family. There's still the practical matter of operating in a COVID environment. So if we need to travel for on-site inspections, testing, or just face-to-faces, we need to do a health and safety assessment for ourselves, for where we're going, and make sure that either appropriate mitigations are in place or that the risk in general is low enough and acceptable. Bottom line there is that if we need to show up on short notice, it's going to be very, very difficult to do because of this type of process that we have to go through. Cumulative effect, as Jason said, our response times will be much longer in some cases, most cases actually. And the other thing we need to stress is that, we understand that the cert plans change and whatnot, but if there are slides and submission of data or compliance evidence or anything that we would need to review, there will be no room for recovery on our end. It'll be near impossible to maintain turnaround times for the original plan dates if things slide on in. And in some cases, the slide may initiate on our end for any variety of reasons. I'm trying not to sound too despondent here, but it is a reality we are facing right now within the team and more broadly across the CAA. The workload is increasing and getting more challenging, and our resources are not necessarily growing. While we've been stable, we're not necessarily growing. We're trying to maintain more than anything else. Moving on to international engagement and foreign validation. There's been a keen interest in the last year. We've noticed in 146 is getting their STCs validated overseas, primarily with the FAA. And unfortunately, we seem to have run into some issues with the FAA's own reorganization in the last year or so. We had been to a point, some of you may remember, where it was quite clear which FAA certification offices needed to be sent which validations. And in some cases, we were getting STCs validated in reasonably quick turnaround time, 3 to 6 months. That has not been the case for the last year or so. The FAA is now running all validations through a single branch, and that branch has limited resources as well. So I don't have the visibility of how the FAA allocates resources to these validations, but it does seem to be taking quite a long time these days. And as an example, we had a Part 27 STC for which our bilateral says the FAA will accept compliance findings and should have been a straightforward, I won't say fully administrative, but mostly administrative exercise. And that still took a year to get validated. This is something for you to be aware of because we are dealing with operators who want to be the STC holder, who want to, so that way they can sell it overseas. And it is challenging to explain to them why we can't get traction with the FAA. We do not have a magic wand with them. We can't really force them to do anything quicker than they want to. So this is just something for your awareness for the foreseeable future. This may be in place. On the bright side, we have finally been able to re-engage with the FAA about updating the IPA and the bilateral to try and improve the means and the methods by which they do this to be more risk-based. The intent would be that there should be a class of STCs that when they go to the FAA for validation should be purely administrative in nature in terms of they make sure all the paperwork is complete, that everything required to issue an STC is present in the data pack. And then at that point, it should be an administrative stamp. And then obviously the more complex STCs will require, further in-depth reviews appropriate again to presumably the risk and the context. But that's where we're going on. It is going to be a long road discussion with them. It always is with the FAA. But we've started it, and it seems like there is interest on their side to keep this effort moving forward, which is a very good thing in my view. So I'm quite happy to be working with them on trying to get that updated as quickly as possible. But quick is not measured in weeks in this context. We're still looking probably over a year before we have any draft language for an updated bilateral. Something of note, we recently attempted to have EASA validate one of our STCs, and it was outright rejected because we don't have a bilateral with them. The EU regulations don't permit validation of third state, non-member state STCs unless there is a previous agreement in place. While we do have bespoke agreements with the EASA for some of our type certificates, nothing is broad. There's nothing broad covering the overall CANs and 146 design approval system today. The reason I mention this is because it's come up a few times in the past where people say we would love to get into the European market, and we end up in a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. EASA doesn't seem interested necessarily to talk to us unless we can say, hey, here's all the STCs we have waiting in the wings. That we would love to get validated, but then it doesn't do you much good sitting on an STC that can't get validated, and so naturally you will find other ways to get that STC into Europe if necessary. Going through a European 21J, which makes total sense. So, but again, if I guess where my pitch is coming here is that if you as 146 as an STC holders have a list of STC that you think you would like to try and market into Europe, please do let us know specifically which ones. Give us the STC numbers, because then that's something at least we can show our contacts the EASA saying we would really like to have a discussion about getting a bilateral going for our design approvals, because then we've got all these STCs here that can go to Europe, and vice versa. We could probably streamline some of the validation of the EASA STCs. So hopefully it will be a win-win for everyone. With other NEAs, we actually do seem to get some more traction. We just recently did one with India that was really straightforward. We had a relatively straightforward validation with Brazil, and Canada on the whole is relatively responsive to us. I wouldn't say they're the quickest, but they're certainly quicker than the FAA in most cases. So, if you are considering wanting to sell an STC to a non-FAA, non-European state, do let us know, and we'll contact that NAA and see what they're able to work. See if they're able to work with us. So we've had some good results with some of the lesser known NAAs recently in terms of validation. Okay, hopefully I'm going to end on a high note here. Development of technical certification in Memos and FAQ. I'm sure we've all been on the phone with each other at one point where we've felt the frustration of lack of visibility about CA's and product certification's stance on particular cert issues and whatnot, and that's been an ongoing issue for years. We recognize that it is difficult for the 146s to, make bids on jobs and put quotes out when it's unsure how a particular scenario may or may not be interpreted by the CAA. We are looking to do this to try and improve this, I should say. The idea behind a certification memo and the FAQ would be to try and follow best practice like similar to the EASA and the FAA do, where the EASA will publish certification memos explaining their rationale and their means for handling a certain situation a certain way from a technical standpoint or a process standpoint. That isn't necessarily related to rule compliance. If it was related to rule compliance, it'd be in an AC. So we're going to try and emulate the same thing. The memos themselves are certainly in early days discussion. We've had some discussions with our legal group, and broadly they don't see any particular issues with it, but it is going through the how, when, and where we do this to make sure we don't run afoul of any of our own internal requirements or contravene any other rules or appropriate information delivery mechanisms. So this is still early days, but we do have a couple of the first cab off the rank for this that we're going to look at trying to publish is a cert memo around the finding of compliance process, which most of you will be familiar with, but if you actually look, you won't find anywhere on the website in terms of what it is explicitly and how it is applied as a matter of practice. So that would be one where we would use it as kind of the initial test case to show, okay, let's put something out there that makes it clear about how we use our discretion when agreeing to delegate a finding of compliance. And so that way yourselves, you have something that you can point to and say, yep, this is exactly what we expect from the CAA. And there should hopefully be, no surprises around that. FAQ could certainly be done much quicker. FAQ would be hopefully one of those things where it's not so much a policy, but just kind of an awareness thing. So if you're running into questions either from your customers or just yourselves that you find coming up on a regular basis that you need to call us up and be like, what was I know we've had this question before, but could you please tell us again? That would be candidate for an FAQ, and we could definitely try to get something on our website in relatively short order, probably not measured in days, but certainly once we had a candidate pool of FAQs to put up there, we could probably get something out in a couple of weeks to a month or so once we had that ready to go. Again, we're trying to improve our transparency and our collaboration, as in line with our values. And so this is the effort we're kicking off right now to do this. Topics, suggestions are welcome for both the policies, sorry, not policies, the cert memos, and the FAQ. So in short, with that, watch this space below. For those of you that have seen this space, this is currently where we've got a couple of letters and guidance that we've put out there. This is where we would look to try to put that additional FAQ, put those additional cert memos, and we revamp the space a little bit to be a little bit easier to use, hopefully. So that is myself for today. Like Glenn said, if there's any questions, please save them for the end of the presentations. We'll see how much time we have left for that. And with that, I will turn it back to Glenn. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaetano. Excuse me. Excellent. Yes, as Gaetano said, we'll think about your questions, and at the end of the presentations, we'll have ample time to try and answer any questions that you've all got. Finally, Rebecca, can you please jump on and do your presentation? Thank you so much.
Kia ora and good morning, everybody. I'm Rebecca Langton. I've been in the excuse me. For those who I haven't interacted with yet, my name's Rebecca Langton. I'm in the flight test engineer role here at CAA, and today I'm talking about the changes to the test pilot application form that we're looking to have. So the reason for using this forum is as an SME group, and I'm looking for your assistance in passing this information on. But as Jason alluded to a little earlier in his presentation, we're having some issues with incomplete submission of data packs, and this is a very specific example of that. So as I'm sure you're all aware, flight test is a blend of operations and engineering. That's the same internally within CAA. I'm placed under Gaetano and Jason and the engineering side of CAA, but your applications actually go into the pilot licensing side because the test pilot application is attached to the individual's pilot license. What this means is that we need the form to be complete and accurate because it's used by multiple different people for multiple different purposes. So just looking at where this form is, apologies for any teaching to suck eggs that comes along with this. The main CAA website has quick links in the center, so you can either go via there or via the search box. But I'm well aware that forms tend to get reused, so please don't pull the last time that it happened out of the drawer. We are on a new version of the form. So about halfway down the forms list, you've got 24019 application 04, application for test pilot approval, experimental. And when we open that one up, you should get this version. So we've got a number of new instructions at the top here. That's how you know that you're in the new form, is that we've got A to H as opposed to A to E. One of the key ones that I really want to talk about today is ensuring that all documents are submitted. And this includes the test plan or test schedule, and we will not be processing your applications with that without that included. We do have the situation that comes around whereby that has already been submitted, depending on what the test flying is doing. So it may be the case that this is part of an STC or a modification, and the test plan has already been submitted in as part of approving that process. Yes, we are requesting that you resubmit. The key here is that it means that the test pilot and the operator's side of the operation are fully aware. So what this has stemmed from is some issues with my ability to contact the applicant and or the Part 146 design engineer who's part of the or the author of the test plan. There has been significant numbers of applications where there's been confusion between the operator, typically the operator who is paying the test pilot who is going to be doing the testing itself, and the design organisation. There was one particular example where once I'd finally managed to get in touch with the test pilot applicant, they were unaware that they were had been nominated and they were unaware of the content of the test plan. As you can imagine, that leads to confusion, rework, and isn't efficient for anybody. So we now require every test pilot application to be submitted with a test plan, and it would be helpful if that could be named, the files named either test plan, test schedule, something that's obvious in that space, even if that is a duplicate to work that's already been submitted to CAA separately. It's then the test pilot signature on that application form. So coming down, the form can be completed with the test pilot details here. And then clearly at the bottom, it's their signature that goes with the applicant declaration, where we are looking for them to be asserting that they have they are aware of their responsibilities as per the application. What we can do is assess a test team. So it is possible to assess either a test pilot individually, which is the typical way of doing things, or a combination, whether that's test pilot, flight test engineer, or two pilots for pilot and co-pilot. So that possibility exists under the systems. So if you have a combination that is going to be more effective at conducting the testing, then do submit that. It will go under the lead pilot's details, and they're the ones who need to be naming and signing here. I understand that I am preaching to the wrong audience. These forms are often submitted either by the test pilot themselves or by the operating company who need the testing to be carried out. What I'm looking for from you is an informed group of subject matter experts who are able to pass on that information when it's quite critical. So that was hopefully short and sweet from me, and I'll hand back over to Glenn. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rebecca. I appreciate that on those three presentations, there was a lot of information that was put out to everyone. But if anyone has got any direct questions relating to those presentations, please feel free to ask a question now. What I'd like to also do is after that is just kind of hand it over to the audience to actually ask us anything that they'd like to see or hear about that we can answer in the future or answer in the in-person seminar that we're having scheduled for the 3rd of November. So please, I open up to the floor for any questions. Please turn your video mic on and answer a question.
It's Dave Weston here. I'll ask a question if you like.
Please do, David.
So it's probably a question for Guy Tarno. So in the presentation, you talked about the challenges of doing the FAA validation and how we don't, or I guess you can't control the FAA timelines per se, and that's a bit of a challenge. And you mentioned that you're working with the FAA on a more risk-based approach in terms of the bilateral. So in those discussions, is there any consideration for making the validation process with the FAA more concurrent with the New Zealand STC process, so you could hopefully reduce the overall end-to-end timescales, as opposed to, you know, completing a New Zealand STC and then handing that to the FAA for review, and then you start the clock ticking on their timeline?
That has not been a point we've discussed yet, David, but I can certainly see what appetite there is for that, if any. We'll make it a discussion point.
Thanks, Gaetan.
Any further questions? No, silence. Well, I'd like to open up to the floor now. Is there anything besides today, anything that the 146s would like future discussions about, and possibly we can do a presentation in the in-person seminar? Again, open to the floor, please. Ask away.
I guess, sorry, it's Dave again.
No worries, Dave. Go for it.
It's kind of a question, and it probably would lead to a discussion around Rebecca's discussion around flight test pilot applications. My question is more general than just flight test pilot applications, but when we're doing flight testing, I guess we typically think about certification flight testing, where we have a prescriptive flight test plan, and we wish to go and execute that with a flight test pilot. There's also, I guess, a scenario that's becoming more common where we're working on an experimental aircraft, and what we're actually trying to do is do some pre-certification evaluations. So, you know, we're developing systems, and part of that system development requires us to kind of prove the concept in flight. We're not necessarily, or we're not doing certification. We're experimentally flying to evaluate equipment, systems, performance, whatever it might be. Is there any kind of guidance around how that can be achieved? Because quite often the objectives of those flight tests are not so specific or prescriptive. We just, in some cases, want to assure that we have a safe aircraft. We want to go flying and learn what the system does and how it behaves. So yeah, it's a little bit different to certification flight testing. Yeah, so that's my general question.
Yep, guidance is in both AC 19.1 and 21.10 at the ACs, and the area that you're looking for there is experimental developmental, so research and development flight test. What I would say is that this is not something that's done without a test plan. I understand your point that this is a different kind of test plan to certification flight test, where the results are then used as evidence, but it still requires the same level of planning, preparation, and in particular the risk assessment work. So there are many opportunities to plan in a way that is most effective for the airborne flight time, and that's not to say that you aren't able to amend the plan whilst airborne. So it's not amending the plan whilst airborne. You plan and you brief for multiple different scenarios, and then you go ahead and fly those test points. Depending on what the results are of the earlier test points, you then flow into previously briefed research and development experimental testing. And I'd be very happy to prep something and talk more about that if that's the particular area that you're looking for, Dave and others. But do have a look at the two ACs. So they were written by Tim Dutton and are very good.
Thanks very much.
Any further questions?
Hi, everybody. David Moody here. As a retired gentleman, I kind of look back on some of the challenges that have been faced through the years, and I see that CAA are currently a little short-staffed. I'm aware of some organisations that I'm working for and with that are short-staffed, and there's a degree, or appears over the course of many years to have been a degree of, I wouldn't say poaching, but we have a relatively small pool, and individuals tend to seek advancement in their careers by working with a 146 for a while and then maybe shifting to another 146. Really, I guess it's a question for Jason in terms of looking strategically at the whole industry, and maybe there's an opportunity there for all of us to work together to develop a mechanism for developing the people that we will need in the future, rather than it being driven from the bottom by the individuals. It could perhaps be, or at least structured from the top, so that there were, rather than seeing it as a threat when someone moves on to another organisation, it's recognised, this is a perfectly natural career progression, and we don't need to worry because that vacancy will be filled by someone coming from somewhere else and wanting to develop with the skill set which is prevalent in this office. So when I have talked previously, and we've struggled a bit to make it work with the idea of seconding people from industry to CAA on a kind of an exchange basis. In practice, it's enormously difficult to make all the numbers work and so on. But maybe we could explore that as a group in terms of having a more cohesive strategy for what I see as probably an ongoing issue. I mean.
Yeah, that's a good point, David. And I guess it's certainly something I think we can talk about and maybe sort of build on later on this year in November. It is a concern, particularly given the size of the industry here in New Zealand. It is very small. It's possibly one of the reasons why, if you look at our CA product certification team, it's kind of a game of spot the Kiwi. There's the majority of them are expats, myself included, and I think we've defaulted often to sort of bringing in from overseas some of the talent in, but there is having COVID and having the border restrictions. It's one of the reasons why we've really struggled to backfill two of our positions. That option of bringing in talent from overseas wasn't available to us. It's highlighted the fact that we need to focus on the development of industry from the from the floor up, from graduates up. I'm having been in some discussions with the Royal Aero Society as well. This is keen on their mind around how we actually engage with whether that's other operators, design organizations, the CA, NZDF, you name it, around how we need to try and foster that, seeing it as an investment, is that you build capability into graduates and throughout their career, so that everyone benefits. As you say, there should be an ongoing churn. We don't want to end up stagnating with the same people in the same organizations, until they leave, because no one really gains from that. There should be an ongoing sharing of knowledge and talent. I guess related to that, I know we've had previous discussions around sharing training resources, and I hope that with the borders being reopening, we can restart some of those conversations around bringing some courses into New Zealand and sharing and opening them for both industry and the CA and NZDF and so on. I don't have the answers, but yes, it's a very timely topic. Appreciate it if anyone else has any ideas or thoughts on that.
David and Jason, hello, Marcus Graney here. A couple of weeks ago, I attended something which does have some parallels to that topic. It was the aerospace cluster event, I think ultimately hosted by Auckland Council. Rocket Lab were speaking, some others. It was interesting, but not what I expected. In the end, it was largely the education sector, the engineering schools, talking about their role in maintaining a pipeline of future aerospace engineers. So the same topic, but at the early part of their career. And people like the Rocket Lab speaker were saying how interested they were in that and how could they support. And I guess Dave's question is the same question.
Just a minor point from me. I'm aware that both the University of Auckland and University of Canterbury have started up aero-specific courses within their engineering departments. I think only one's undergraduate and one's a master's program. But that at least encourages some onshore development at that end of the career progression. What we as an industry do to collectively bring people together, broaden. I would also just want to do a name drop for the Royal Aeronautical Society as a useful medium by which this kind of encouragement can go.
Further questions?
Glenn and particularly Gaetano, Marcus here again. Gaetano, what is the driver behind the introduction of the certification memos as a vehicle, as opposed to developing existing or writing new ACs, advisory circulars?
A lot of it has to do with the fact that the intent of an AC is around rule compliance, again, means of compliance. So things like the finding of compliance process is more, again, it's more process focused. That's why I think it is better in a cert memo. It's not so much about telling how the industry, how they can comply with the rules. It's explaining CA positions and ways of doing business a little bit more clearly. And again, the other NAAs use that same type of tool to that effect as well. So it's us trying to learn from how the other tools that other NAAs use to try and make clear how they operate. And again, trying to make sure that the ACs themselves remain ACs rather than just this catch-all thing that actually doesn't deal with rule compliance. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Yeah, the difference is subtle, but thank you.
Anything more from anyone?
I guess just building, sorry, Glenn, on
No.
Dave Moody's sort of comment and question. I guess I'd put it back out there as do any of the 146s at this point have something like a mentoring, secondment development of whether it's an apprentice or junior engineers, or have an ability to second into organizations? I guess from our perspective as a CAA, we've had discussions around secondment before. The real concern, it's not an impossibility, but I guess the concern that needs to be managed is around a potential conflict of interest. And we have had secondments from the likes of the NZDF before. It's something we did not really explore during COVID, given I would say we try to manage that without some of the secondments, and also given the fact of what it may look like bringing other engineers away from commercial organizations into the CAA. But I'd be interested to find out if any other organizations have, whether it's formal or informal development opportunities that they're managing.
Hi everybody, it's James Powell here from Dawn Aerospace, and I'm a delegate for Airwork as well. So that's why I'm here. But just in the context of Dawn, so we work really closely with University of Canterbury because we're in Christchurch, but certainly open to the same thing with Auckland in terms of building talent there. So we do a lot of final year projects and other postgrad research and things like that. In order to build that pipeline of talent at the universities and help give them exposure to industry and awareness of methodology from industry and so on. And then internally, we certainly endeavor to create an environment where there is really open and easy collaboration between anyone in the organization, so that it's a very easy environment for all staff to work with other staff and learn from other staff. And one really important initial aspect of that is understanding what capabilities other staff members have. So, if you need to learn more about wiring, you can go and talk to the wiring guru. If you need to learn about structural analysis, you can go and talk to the FE guru, and so on. And so it's quite an informal structure, but we try to make sure that it's very broadly available, so that people really can learn from everyone in the team. And I mean, I don't imagine that's too different to many places. But yeah, we certainly really push this, really try to leverage the knowledge of the entire organization. Thanks.
Hey, good morning. It's Simon here from New Zealand. Similar to what James was discussing, we also have quite a wide comment opportunity. We often take in a lot of staff throughout the year from our Part 145 maintenance organisation. They often come through either our Auckland or Christchurch design offices to spend a couple of weeks at a time to get a bit of a feel as to what we do, and that helps us greatly, because that gives them better understanding of the type of information that we require to carry out repairs, modifications. We have a graduate program within in New Zealand. This year we are taking on 5 graduates from universities around New Zealand, and as part of their 2-year rotation scheme within the company, they often spend about 3 months within our group. And historically, obviously not recently, but historically, we've taken on comments from both Airbus and Boeing. Airbus mainly in our Christchurch office, but we have had them in Auckland as well. They're usually junior engineers starting off their career within Airbus, but we get a bit of insight into the groups that they work in internally, and they get to see as operators what data we're getting from our maintenance providers and some of the issues that we're working with. But I think we're always keen and always open to work with other organizations and take on other common opportunities. There's obviously always the question about intellectual property and data security, but there's usually often procedures in place to control those.
Thanks, Simon, for that. Lastly, any further questions? Please engage us. We're always wanting to listen to our 146s.
James here from Dawn again. I was just curious if there's anything in particular industry can do to help you guys with resourcing and so on. Like you know, there's the obvious things with along the lines of following guidance properly and using the forms and making sure applications are complete and so on. So that's all pretty understandable and straightforward. But I was sort of wondering more broadly if there are things that we need to be highlighting with government or others, you know, perhaps above CA or peripheral to CA. If you've got any ideas on this, please let us know how we can, you know, all work together to help you guys out. Certainly recognize that you guys are, you got a tough job and not enough people to help out with it. So, yeah.
Thanks, James. I guess to comment on that, you know, given we are a Crown entity, we do need to be careful in terms of how we communicate some of our resource constraints and challenges to ministers. I think what I would say is obviously any comments or observations that you may make as operators or organizations that affect you and impact you. You know, obviously you have the power and ability if you want to either talk to your minister or talk to you know, whether it's senior management at CA around what some of the concerns may be. The real issue we do face at the moment is we are constrained with our funding, given the fact that the majority of our funding comes through passenger levy taxes, which is now improving. But you know, when the borders closed, there was a significant chunk of our revenue gone. And so we were at the mercy of what was provided to us via government, and that still will remain in place for some time, I think. And the bottom line is we have the directive to effectively cut from the cloth that we have. We have to work within our means, within our current means. That's not to say we are exploring different ways of working and other ideas around resourcing, etc., to minimize that impact. But I would say, obviously, if you have avenues that you think you know, may help, by all means, you can try those and explore those. Likewise, if there's anything that you think that we could work differently or potentially more efficiently or something, sometimes we have our own blind spots. I'd be quite willing to have any discussions around any perceived issues or potential areas for improvement. Thanks.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, Dave Weston here again, just to follow up on this discussion about, I guess, the resource constraint issue, which I think we're all tackling. Within the CAA, clearly, like the rest of us, you have resource constraints within the certification team, and some of those constraints sometimes come against specific competencies. You know, when you have an application that has a certain technology or certification aspect to it that you don't have in-house, is there any ability or consideration to bring in that expertise on an as-required basis from industry? And the reason I ask that is, I think I've seen the EASA do that kind of thing on STCs before, where if they don't have in-house permanent, CVE, let's say, they'll pull one in from industry. Obviously, that has no conflict of interest to help progress applications.
Jason, I can talk to this one if you want. It is something, Dave, it is something we can consider and have considered in the past. We've done particularly around flight testing in the past, prior to the establishment of a full-time flight test engineer position at the CA, we would contract in flight test expertise for larger programs that required it. So short answer, yes, we can and have done that in the past and can do that going forward. Again, it's a question of when it comes down to it's about finding the right resource, making sure there is no conflict of interest, and the challenge is always setting up the contract and the legal mechanisms to do that correctly, where in terms of who's pays for who and all that kind of thing. So, but it does exist.
Thanks, Gaetan.
Without any further questions, what I would like just to do is just quickly talk to everyone about the in-person seminar that we've got scheduled for the 3rd of November down in Wellington at the James Cook Hotel. I will be soon starting to really start organising this event, so I will be sending out correspondence in the very, very near future. So please think of questions, think of subjects that you'd like to hear from us, and when I send it out, just please send it back to me, and then we can start organising how we present at the seminar. Also, this presentation will be put online, and I'll send that out to everyone, the web address. And please, any further questions anyone would like to talk about or discuss, I believe everyone will have my email. Just please email me with a question, and as I said before, we will get back to you as soon as we can, or if it's a more in-depth question, we can talk about it at the seminar. So we hope to see everyone at the in-person seminar. It's great for us to do the in-person seminar. It's good meeting all the 146 participants. So finally, before we leave today, I hope everyone got something out of today. We all did. Is there any final questions? Okay, with that, I will end today's seminar, and the team here at Product Insert will look forward to seeing you all on the 3rd of November. Just quickly with that, we tried to organise it to coincide with the Royal Aeronautical Society Symposium, which is scheduled on the 4th in the same building, same place. So if anyone is interested to do the 2-day event, Yeah, please do. But that will all come out in correspondence in the very near future. So hopefully everyone has a great day. Enjoy the beautiful weather. We'll see you in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See you in
Thank
November.
you.
Cheers.
Thanks, team.
Thanks, Glenn. See ya.